Recording?
Oh, yeah, I'm recording.
Oh, gosh. Okay. This was all off the record for me. All right.
Shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. All right, let's do it. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 21 of the Goulet Pencast, where fountain pens are still a thing. I am Brian Goulet.
And I am Drew Brown.
And we are here from Goulet Pens to deliver this casual and informal, tangential and extraneous, superfluous and extemporaneous fountain pen show, where today we're only taking Q&A questions. We're not talking about all that other stuff, mainly because we're having to record this in advance. I am not available this week that you are viewing this. So Drew and I doubled up and we recorded one in advance just for you. And so since we can't predict the future and know what is timely to talk about at the time we're recording this, we figured, why don't we just shoot like an all Q&A question and answer some of these questions that we've been sitting on for a while. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to load it up and just pound out some high quality, top shelf answers to your pen questions. Are you ready to do this, Drew? It's going to be a marathon.
They will be answers. How high they are on the shelf is up to interpretation.
I think you all should, as viewers, set your expectations as high as they can go and then expect them to be exceeded. I think that's what you should do.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Look what he's doing.
Yeah, get ready. This is going to be enlightening. I don't know any other way to say it. You will probably...
All right.
You will probably feel transformed by the time you've watched this whole Q&A. I don't want to overhype it, but it's probably going to be the best thing you've ever seen and will see in your lifetime. Is that overhyping it, Drew? Or do you think that's pretty accurate?
I mean, it's possible that it will be if depending on how their life has gone up to this point. I sincerely hope this isn't the best thing you've ever seen. But if it is, you're welcome.
Drew, it's
only uphill from here.
I'm trying to psych you and me up so that we make sure to deliver the best thing that they've ever seen.
Yes!
That's exactly what we're going to do. All right, we're going to start this off. I'm going to ask the first question from Small Stitches.
That's right.
I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Small Stitches? I don't know.
No, small, like small.
Small Stitches. Okay.
Yeah.
Should the slit between the tines of your fountain pen nib be perfectly centered? Is there a reason that it may not be? Basically, yes, it should be centered. Will it function if it's not? Perhaps. That's like asking if the wheels on your car should be straight and round. It's like, well, I mean, it might function if it's not, but ideally it definitely should be.
Yeah, it's definitely there for a reason. And
yeah.
If it's off, then it's likely that it will not perform as it should. The nib and the feed are kind of smushed together so that they can create an ink channel, right? And there is stuff going on that allows that to happen. On the nib side, the thing going on is the slit, and on the feed side, the thing going on is the ink channel. And those two things need to be aligned. That they together create a Voltron of ink flow when they combine, and that's what you want. And if you've got your ink channel here and your nib slit here, then yeah, maybe some ink will kind of smush over and find its way where it needs to be, but it's not going to be ideal. And you could have interrupted flow, no flow at all. It really just depends, but it's supposed to be mated up. So if your nib is cut off center, not only is it very likely that the slit in the tine won't be right directly above the ink channel, but it could also mean that you've got one chunk of tipping material significantly larger than the other, and that creates a whole nother host of issues. So yes, it should be straight down the middle. Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure that is the intention of every fountain pen manufacturer, is to have it look like that. Now, sometimes there are manufacturing mistakes that happen and all that, super, super few and far between, but every now and then one will slip through, and that may be the case. But it really probably shouldn't be like that. Now, Drew, technically, if you have the cut for the slit going straight in the middle of the tines, but then it goes off center from there, and then theoretically, if your feed was equally off centered, that would still probably work, right? Maybe?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that alignment, that proper flow, the capillary action. Everything's got to match up, and having it straight down the middle is the most reliable way to do that. So yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you can actually take a peek. If you've got a nib with a breather hole in there, you can actually kind of peek into the breather hole and you can see the ink channel. And that could be a good indication of how accurate it is in alignment.
Yeah. And in fact, the breather hole, it's arguable, but it makes a very nominal difference into the actual ink flow itself. That hole on the nib. And in fact, the pen that I just pulled up here, the Diplomat Aero, does not have a breather hole. But the Pilot 823 here, I can't get super close in, but it does have a breather hole. That breather hole is really just to give you a place to stop when you're grinding, not you, the manufacturer, a place to stop when you're cutting the slit down the nib. So you have a dedicated place. Otherwise it would, it could possibly end up in maybe different lengths and distances and stuff. Especially old school, the way they used to do it, it wasn't automated, it was manual. So they would do it by hand and just kind of like have a grinding wheel and then just kind of push the nib down into the grinding wheel. And theoretically, you could go further or not as far or whatever. So for consistency's sake, if you have a little breather hole punched in there before you do the cut for the slit, it just gives you a nice consistent place to be able to do it. And then it makes it visually, it's easier. You can kind of see through that breather hole when you're aligning the nib. You can see that, feed channel, through the breather hole. It just makes it easier. So that's kind of why it's there.
And there are plenty of manufacturers that still do it manually like that. Like, some of the places we visited do it that way.
More so on like the gold nibs and stuff. They're really the higher end stuff, just making sure. So yeah, there you go. Good question. All right.
Great.
Drew?
All right. Next up, Brian, we have a question from Torpedo Monkey.
Of course we do.
So this is going to require a very definitive answer with zero speculation. Torpedo Monkey demands an answer to the question, why has Kaweco still not released a piston filler Kaweco Sport?
That's because one has not been made. There you go. Mind blown. I wish I had deeper insights into specifically why. I mean, not every pen maker has a piston filler. It's not like assumed that any pen is going to be made as a piston. So why does any manufacturer not have any given model as a piston? Because they haven't made it that way.
Why does anybody do anything?
Yeah. I think it'd be kind of cool. I can see some challenges with it, specifically because the Sport is a pretty thin bodied pen and it's a very short pen. So you already right off the bat don't have a lot of room to work with, especially if you're trying to work with the cap and have it post and all this kind of stuff. It's going to end up being a teeny tiny little piston without much ink capacity. So will they do that? I would be kind of surprised if they did, because frankly, it would make much more sense to take a larger pen, just a size like, I don't know, the other, the Kawecos, like the
Perkeo?
Yeah, the Perkeo. It fits a full size converter. It's a larger body. To take something more of that size and make it a piston would make a lot more sense. I really would be surprised if we saw a Sport with a piston, but I mean, yeah, it'd be cool to see that. I like piston pens, so I'd love to see it.
Brian, do you think that Kaweco is the most well-known fountain pen brand that does not have a piston filler?
No, probably not. Especially because when you think about the price range that most of those pens sell for, they don't sell in a range where you would expect to see a lot of pistons. I mean, think about even any steel nib pen, a piston is more the exception than the rule. Piston mechanisms are inherently more complicated, a lot more parts, more engineering, a lot of different things. So these days you tend to only see pistons mostly on gold nib pens, with some exceptions like TWSBI and Noodlers. But it's just, there's a lot going on there to try and fit a reliable piston filling mechanism on a pen that size and that price. So I'm not really surprised that we don't see one. And I think if we did see one, we would see it in the $100 plus price range, most likely, even from what is generally known as a more affordable brand like Kaweco. I think that, that pretty much is it. I think that's all I was going to say about that.
Okay.
Yeah. But, we'll keep our ears open. And if we hear anything, we'll let you know. All right, Drew. This is a very simple question. Izzy IK, best engineered pens? That's it. It's really not even a question. It's kind of a demand.
No, it's not really, but...
So Izzy is demanding you tell the best engineered pens.
Well, I have some thoughts for Izzy. And it was pretty fascinating because I'm basing best engineered pens off of like a very physical nature. not so much how well they write, because you could very easily say that, nib and flow and feed engineering is what they're talking about. I'm taking it in a different direction. I'm thinking more about the whole pen engineering, more of a physical design aspect. So one of the first brands that popped into my head was Edison, specifically because we've had the opportunity, Brian, to visit their site. You on, I think, more than one occasion, myself once, and the attention to detail that I know that the Edison Pen Company takes in creating their pens is huge. And seeing the amount of handwork that goes into there, knowing how minute their measurements are and how specific their measurements are, it was a really fascinating thing to see. And every time I hold one of those pens now, it might just be because of my perspective, I look at it and I know kind of what went into it. And I know for a fact that they take a ton of time and intentional effort. And they also have very, very high standards, I know. Like Brian Gray and his team there at the Edison Pen Company are not okay with anything less than perfect. So Edison popped into my head, and I would probably say the same thing about a number of small batch manufacturers. They're able to take the time and be really they have what's the word I'm looking for? Discerning.
Yeah, there you go.
Be very discerning with their final product. Lamy has to be on the list. They have been up at the top of the engineering side of things in the fountain pen realm for years and years and years. You can't not include Lamy when you talk about well-engineered pens. The 2000 specifically. I know we talk about that pen a lot on the Pencast.
Oh, yeah.
But it is a marvel of fountain pen engineering, and it's popular for a very, very good reason. Even if it's...
Lamy has specifically won design and engineering awards for the building that they built for their engineers to engineer their pens. That's how remarkable their engineering is.
Yeah, you can't talk about engineering in fountain pens without talking about Lamy.
Yeah.
Everything they have is just pure and simple engineering, and they take a lot of pride in that. And that's one of the main reasons they occupy the popular space in the fountain pen industry that they occupy, is because of their engineering. And then TWSBI has marvelous engineering as well. The most fascinating thing about TWSBI is how well their engineering is at their price point. It's just baffling how precise things are, how well things fit together, connect, and work, and still you can get one of these things for $20. It's insane. And the capping is so fantastic. These pens have such a great reputation for not drying out, and that is because of precise and accurate engineering in their pens. And they're creative as well. It's not just an engineering aspect from just a design standpoint, it's an engineering aspect in terms of mechanisms, and that I find really, really fascinating. They're not afraid to push the boundaries. Take an example like the TWSBI Eco, which is a tremendously popular pen. The company is not afraid to push their own limits in engineering and come up with something like the Swipe or the Go. They didn't need to do that. They didn't need to disrupt themselves and come up with something more engineeringly creative, but they did, because that's such a big point of their brand identity. So hats off to TWSBI. I don't think they're going to stop doing that anytime soon. And I'm always thrilled to see what they come up with next.
Yeah,
they
it's kind of in their DNA. Yeah.
No, they're not just going to play it safe. And I love that about them. I think the fountain pen world is better with pen companies like that in there. And then for an honorable mention, this brand is kind of on a hiatus right now. We've never been able to carry them, but Konid is a Belgium-based fountain pen manufacturer that has always made small batches of pens, but it's known throughout the pen community because of their really crazy design and their engineering prowess in terms of their own fiddling mechanism, which is, as far as I know, a unique one in the industry. It's kind of a combination draw filler and kind of a piston. It is a piston, but the rod separates from the gasket and kind of goes into a resting position, which is just really, really unique. And if you've ever had the opportunity to use one, you know what I'm talking about. Again, it's not something we've ever carried, probably won't ever be able to carry it, unfortunately. But I encourage you to look it up online. Never say never,
but yeah, it's there.
Yeah,
they stopped shipping
look it up
pens
online.
To even end consumers, so they're not looking to expand retailers right now.
Yeah, but it's definitely something that occupies a very unique place in the industry because of their engineering.
Absolutely. And
you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I think there's obviously lots of ways that you could kind of interpret this question, since it is such a wide open thing. But, like all educated people do, I looked at Wikipedia for what the word engineering means, because I was like, what are we calling engineering here? So it's the use of scientific principles to design and build machines, structures, and other items, including bridges, tunnels, roads, vehicles, and buildings. So, Drew, I can interpret this as like, which pens do we think we could assemble into the best bridges or buildings? So, we could really go wide with this question. But anyway, it's basically
I'm not going to even respond to you right now, because
well,
you're behaving too much like Brian Goulet at this moment.
I'm turning this into a hypothetical question that I don't want to answer. But no, I think there's just, anytime you throw the word best, it's completely up to interpretation, depending on what it is that you think it is. It's very subjective. You can engineer something to be a piece of crap, and it can be great engineering for what you were trying to accomplish.
Well, that's not the point of this question.
Well, look at, okay.
We don't need to split hairs here. What do you think are the best, most uniquely engineered pens? Come on, man.
Okay, I'll give you a great example. Bic disposable ballpoint pens. They are tremendous marvels of engineering because they were trying to create the absolute cheapest pen that could be mass produced. They accomplished by far exactly what they were trying to do. Is it the greatest writing experience? No. But they did exactly what they were trying to accomplish. The engineering was fantastic for what they were trying to do. So, obviously I'm just kind of being a smart aleck on this one, but
oh, you think?
Am I? In general, fountain pens, every single fountain pen company is standing on the shoulders of giants when it comes to engineering and technology, because fountain pens themselves are more or less at the pinnacle of writing instrument technology. Of course, you can over-engineer and do all kinds of different things with other types of pens. Kind of
like how you're doing with this answer?
Yeah, exactly. I'm over-engineering it. But really, fountain pens for a, of course, we're super biased, so we think it's the best writing instrument. But, you look at the number of patents and stuff that came out around fountain pens in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was a super technologically driven development to come up with the writing instrument. Is that still happening today? No. So, basically, you're coming out with iterations of something that already was marvelously engineered. So pretty much anything that we're talking about, as long as it's a writing functional fountain pen, is up for debate as to how well it's engineered. Now, that said, if you're talking about quality control and consistency and stuff like that, I think we have to mention basically all the Japanese companies, Pilot, Sailor, Platinum. Their QC is superb. I think that Pelican, especially with their Souvron series M400 up through M1000, are tremendous. That's why they haven't changed them in decades, is because it's kind of hard to improve upon them. And then I think other companies like Diplomat, ST DuPont, Namiki, David Oscarson, their fit and finish is sublime. I think they have different design elements and things like that, but the engineering for the cap on a Diplomat Aero and just that crisp sound like that, you cannot accomplish that without tremendous engineering. So there's honorable things to talk about with most of the fountain pen brands out there. So anyway, and that's it. I'm going to get off my smart aleck horse.
See, I think what we talked about this earlier. We're like, wow, we got 15 questions. We're not gonna be able to get through all these. And I said, sure we will. I've done the math. If we do this many minutes per, and Brian's, he's trying to prove me wrong now. He's like, oh yeah, I'll show you, Drew.
That's right.
I'll prove it. We're not gonna get through.
I'm gonna wreck your math. Right. We'll move it along.
All right.
We'll move it along. Go ahead, Drew.
Next question comes from Bug Guy Sim, and he asks us, Brian, maybe you've covered this before, but do you always match pen and ink colors?
No, but it's certainly my natural inclination to at least consider it. So if I pick up a pen, especially that has a strong dominant color, like an orange pen, I have this one right at my disposal, so that's why I'm using it in every question. But if it's an orange pen like this, naturally I'm going to be like, ooh, I wonder what orange would match this. And I'm like, do I really need an orange? No. Or like if I have a new exciting ink, I'd be like, oh, I want to use that. Oh, well, I really want to use this pen. Okay, I don't care that it's a hot pink and it's an orange pen. Whatever, I'm just going to use it. But certainly it's like the first instinctual thing. It's just very visual, and I look and I say, what would match this? Or something that would contrast it in a complementary way, right? So something that would be maybe not an orange, but something that would complement that orange nicely. I don't know, like a black or a brown, Drew, right? So I think that, there's lots of things that you could do that would, kind of go in that way. But, much like the way that I dress, much like the way that I have many of the aesthetic things in my life, it kind of crosses my mind, but I'm not going to like go really out of my way to make it happen. I'm not one of the people that will like, I need to buy a specific thing because it will match this other thing that I have to have at this point in time. I'm like, no, that's too much work. I'm just going to, if I like it, I'm going to get it. If I think it pairs up well enough and it's here and it's convenient and I want to try it, then I'm just going to do it. So there you go. But that said, I do like when I'm testing inks and stuff like that, I do tend to like pens that are a little more neutral, things like TWSBIs and stuff like that, or maybe like a charcoal or a black or something like that, because then I just know I'm not going to have that kind of at least initial like ping of, maybe bias towards a certain color, so I like demonstrators for that reason. I like pens that are a little more neutral for when I know that the ink is really the thing that I'm trying to get out of the experience. But it's usually somewhat of an afterthought for me. How about you, Drew?
Yes, always. I'm not super strict always. I'm not super strict about this is an orange pen, it needs to be with an orange ink, like you made an example of.
Yeah.
But I am always intentional about matching in some way, because not due to the fact that I need to pair it for aesthetic purposes, but due to the fact that I'm really bad at making decisions about ink, and we always have so many inks that I want to try. It's helpful for me to put rails on this thing. Like I collect some things, okay, and everything that I collect, I have to put rails on. Like I'm only going to collect old video game cartridges, not discs. I'm only going to collect Funko Pop figures that are main characters from 1980s movies. I'm only going to I need rails, because otherwise I will lose control. I know this about myself, so this gives me rails. If I say I'm going to pick an
losing
ink,
control is so much fun, though. It's so much fun.
It's sure.
I highly recommend it. Just go nuts.
It's also paralyzing sometimes, and I just need to pick an ink. So if I have an orange pen, I'm like, okay, cool. I'll at least stick with some earth tones, right? I'll go with a brown or an orange or something around there. So that at least narrows my selection down a little bit, and that just helps me make decisions a little bit easier. So
maybe not like it has to match, like be the color of the pen, but there's always an aesthetic consideration that you rely upon to make a decision. So you would not just like, oh, I have this ink I want to try. Oh, well, see, this gets back to our pen cleaning habits, Drew. You always have pens that are like clean and ready to go, whereas I would be like, what's the pen that I have around that doesn't already have ink in it or needs to be cleaned? Oh, this one? Oh, it happens to be fuchsia? Oh, okay, I'll use this, whatever, turquoise. Those actually kind of go well together, but like whatever. A purple pen and I'll use this yellow ink in it. Like, no, it doesn't look great together, but whatever.
Yeah, I will say having only 3 pens inked up at a time does make that a challenge, because I've got 3 pens inked up right now, and 2 of them I've had such a hard time uninking. So rather than choosing the one I've had inked up the longest to be the one that changes out for the new one, I've just been changing out one, because the other 2 I love writing with so much. So it's been challenging. But what I would do in that situation, if I had a magenta ink that I really wanted to write with, I would say, all right, which one of you pens is going to go away, and I'm going to find another pen in the collection that matches better with the magenta and bring that out.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. Or I have a black pen that's ready to go, and that can work with anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Like right now, I have a Prussian blue ALR you could put magenta in that, no problem.
With me, Drew, now that I think about it, I think nib size of the given pen at hand is as much a factor for me as the color. Like if I have an ink that I really want to use, a new ink or something like that, And this we may be somewhat unique because we are trying new inks all the time for the purpose of our career, right? Like for
and we
job.
have access to
and we have
all of them.
we have immediate access to the hottest new inks. So like we want to try those right away. So we may be a little more ink driven in some of this type of decision making. But yeah, I will have an ink and I'm like, oh, I know this is a really good shader, or I know this is really good. And I have this pen, oh, it's an extra fine. That's not really going to do it justice.
Yeah.
So that actually is probably a bigger factor for me, maybe even than the actual color of the pen. But then that said, I completely mix up my ink colors and pens all the time. I leave them in there and then I forget what ink was in there exactly. I might remember, but if I have a bunch of pens and there's like 5 different blues in there, I'm like, I think this was Navajo turquoise, but I don't know. I really need to be sure. Darn it, I need to clean it out.
It's probably blue water ice.
Could be. I have a lot of blue inks. Anyway, there you go. Good stuff. Well, I would love to know what you all do, because obviously you can nuance this a little bit, but I know this is like something very common with people in the fountain pen world, and it's part of the fun, honestly. But I'm curious to know like what drives your ink and pen matching, habits. Kind of curious how that works out. All right, moving on. Viva La Kelly asked, we need to know where Drew buys his shirts, assuming he buys them and they're not donated from people that don't want to wear them anymore. I'm joking, Drew. We love your shirts.
Yeah.
But I have nothing to contribute to this question, so I'm just going to let you take it over.
Yeah, I put this on here because every time I ask for questions, I do get at least one of these. So here during the All Questions Considered episode, we are going to, it's not an interesting answer because all over the place. I've been buying funky shirts for a while. It started off when I just kind of bought some cheapo Hawaiian shirts. I'm like, oh, these are fun. And then I was like, I don't have anything to wear during the holidays. And then I started buying Christmas sweaters. But then it became a challenge because they started making intentionally tacky Christmas sweaters. And I said, I don't want those. I want ones that were meant to look good. So that's been a challenge. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep this going. So anyway, I just started buying funky button-ups. And I find a lot of them at like, Marshalls or TJ Maxx, they show up and they're like $13. So I was like, okay, why not? This one I got from the Hot Topic website like 3 years ago. So you never know where you might find them. But it's kind of a thing where if anybody sees a funky t-shirt, they're like, hey, Drew, what about this one? And I'm like, But then sometimes I'm like, So yeah, the Disney website, I've bought a couple from there. There's a website called Box Lunch that they have a couple. My really funky, crazy 80s ones are from a website called Supermassive Shop. And then there's another one called Middle of Beyond. That's where I got my Ghostbusters shirt and a couple others, I think. But yeah, they're all over the place. I mean, they're not. It's not uncommon to find funky printed button-ups. They're kind of everywhere. Yeah. But no secret. Just I've been picking them up for years, and when I see one, especially if it's less than $20, that's what I really like.
There you go.
And that's it.
Drew, this actually segues really nicely into our next question.
That's not possible.
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay.
I literally have nothing to contribute to this question. So
I guess it kind of would
go
be.
ahead and ask the next one.
All right. Well, let's hear. It kind of looks like Gwen Elliott. I'm just gonna go with that. Gwen Elliott asks, if y'all weren't doing fountain pens professionally, what would your jobs be?
So the reason
I don't even want to imagine that.
The reason I say this segues nicely, Drew, is because you could be some kind of like shirt connoisseur or purveyor of funky shirts. You mentioned like funkybuttonups.com or something like that. I could see you at least being the mascot. Maybe not running the thing, but like at least being the front man for funky button downs or button ups.
Yeah, they need they need a very generic looking human, somebody that just mushes into the background. You, what's your name, Drew? I don't have a job because I never got to work at the Goulet Pen Company. Please hire me. I got nothing better to do. Okay.
Okay, so that is one thing that you and I need to get on the same page about, Drew. Did you interpret this question as if we had like never gotten into fountain pens, what would we be doing? Or if we had to like stop and do something different? Because I have two very different answers.
That is two very different answers. Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like I know myself better now than I did 10 years ago. So I feel like maybe we could answer it as of now.
Okay. Well,
Because back then, I don't know. I'd probably Circuit City was still a thing back then. I don't even know where the heck.
Yeah, they're not around anymore. So
no, but I did used to work for them.
There you go. And I used to work for Radio Shack. They're still around though, I think. I don't know what they're doing now. Maybe they're selling funky button-up shirts.
Probably not radios.
They weren't selling many radios at the time I was working there in the early 2000s. But anyway, we did sell transistors and capacitors and all those things. Anyway, so I sort of posed the question a little bit as if I hadn't gotten into fountain pens, because obviously that would be such a different, life experience. I honestly can't say where I'd be because I was all over the place. And I mean, how else do you end up in the fountain pen business? You have to kind of be wandering through life a little bit, especially because I didn't have a family business that I was working in around fountain pens. Then that would kind of make sense. But like, how else do you end up as an online purveyor of obscure and technologically perhaps outdated, writing instruments? Well, you find it somehow. So I was considering going into the Army. I had an ROTC scholarship that I turned down, but I was considering heavily going in. I thought very seriously about becoming an electrician. I was actually a realtor, and I sold one house. And I did house power washing. I was a certified carpet cleaner and upholstery cleaner. I did home repair, deck sealing, all kinds of stuff like that. So I really don't know where I was going or what I was going to end up doing. I kind of am very fortunate that I found this, because I'd probably be lying down in a ditch somewhere if I hadn't ended up in fountain pens. Or at least I'd be like homeless in the woods as some kind of like, Survivor Man type situation, because I don't know how I'd provide for myself. But I've always loved tools and construction, building things, woodworking. So I think, I probably would have gone somewhere down that road, because originally that's what I was trying to do with Goulet pens, is I was making pens out of wood. So had that not panned out, I might have pursued some level of carpentry or woodworking or something like that, working in a cabinet shop maybe. I don't know. I had a lot of passion around that and still do in my spare time. My formal education was in residential property management, and seeing as how there are people all over the earth who need places to live, there are properties to be managed with residents in them. It's a pretty good fallback if I ever needed to get into that. It wasn't like where my heart was calling me, particularly after I did my internship there and got my degree. I was like, yeah, I don't know about this. But that could have been a good fallback. And I think I probably could have ended up in some sort of content creator, influencer type space, because I was sort of doing that in tandem with the retailer aspect of Goulet pens. I could have very well done a similar type of thing, but just in a different kind of industry around tools or something, like where I had other passions, that it could have led me down that road. And I could have probably not established a retailer type of situation around that, but could have been, more of like a content creator and had like a video, woodworking guild, online guild or something like that. I could have see kind of going down that road, and something like that. But I don't know. I really didn't have much of a plan before I got into all this. I was very, very young. I was 23 when I started making pens. So it was, what do you know at 23, Drew? Basically nothing. Basically nothing.
And I knew less.
Yes, I agree. If I was forced to stop, I'm just kidding. If I was forced to stop now, I mean, I have obviously like a reputation, some notoriety of some degree. I have more business experience than I did 12 years ago. So I would probably take some time to reflect. If somebody said like, nope, Goulet Pens is shut down, you can't do this anymore, you have to do something completely different, I'd probably take some time and just reflect and consider my next career move, maybe do some consulting of some kind, because there's lots of small businesses, and I'm proud of what we've done at Goulet Pens. I would like to think that there's some level of experience or, contribution I could have to other companies in some consulting capacity. I don't think I'd be a great consultant, so it would not be a long-term gig for me because I'm pretty unmanageable. I've never had a job before where I've done satisfactorily. The quality of my work's always been good, but I'm too much of a what do you call it? a change agent. I do not comply well with established procedures and instruction. I challenge basically everything that is presented to me. So if somebody's, giving me like, well, here's how you do it. You just do this job and then that's your job. I'd be like, well, why do we do it this way? What if we did it this way? Have you tried this, that? And I end up just being really, really annoying.
That's really surprising to me, considering how well and efficiently you answer wide open questions.
I know, you would think. Yeah. But, you learn something new every day, right? So I love e-commerce and just marketing and doing this kind of stuff. So certainly I could see doing something related to that. But again, that unmanageable aspect, I would probably at this point not be able to really ever work for anybody else for any significant period of time. But I also should say, like, this is not going to happen if I have anything to do about it. I have no inclination to voluntarily change my situation here in the foreseeable future. So y'all are stuck with me as you are here. I have no desire to leave doing Goulet pens in the current capacity. There you go.
I think you could be managed. It would just need to be a very specific type of management. It would need to be like, you'd need to be like, some sort of on-site manager, and then you have like some sort of corporate dude above you that only shows up every once in a while to be like, how are your numbers? Okay, great, and then leave.
Yeah, if it was you also like hands off, like, I don't know what you do, I don't care how you do it, just do your thing. Okay, that is the only scenario where I could see it working.
Well, even if it was a little bit more than that, I think you're shortchanging yourself a little bit, because while you also have learned a lot about management and leadership over the last decade, you've also learned, what works as a direct report and what is not really acceptable. So I do think you'd probably be better than you think you would be as a as someone who needs to be led.
You're right. I am being hard on myself. I'm not unmanageable in terms of like difficult to deal with, but I think it's more
it's definitely not your natural state, for sure.
It's not my natural state, and I move very quickly, so it's like, and this works because we're in e-commerce. I have many different roles I kind of serve in, so things change a lot, which keeps it very dynamic for me. And certainly there are roles like that out there, and that's certainly what I would seek if I were to ever go work for somebody else. But that's never been my experience at any of my past jobs, if you can even call it that, because I'm going back so far to having worked for other people that it's really not even relevant experience. It was like I was a stalker at Food Lion while I was in college, and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I'm a hard worker and I'm a good employee, but I would not be happy there for very long at all unless it was changing a lot and I had a lot of challenges. So I wouldn't be at any one place. I would bounce around all the time and probably end up starting my own business again. What about you, Drew?
Right now, I would probably, if the earth opened up and just swallowed up Goulet pens and I was the lone survivor, I would probably see if I could learn how to repair pinball machines and do that. That sounds like fun. Repairing
pinball machines, is that like a legitimate thing?
Oh, sure. Pinball is like still a popular. It's kind of like fountain pens, where it's popular within its own little zone.
Like a diehard following kind of.
Yeah, and not everybody who owns a pinball machine knows how to fix it. I don't know either, but I feel like it would be fun to learn, and I could just be that quirky dude that shows up and has a bag of funky tricks and fixes your pinball machines. Make sure that the little magnet that sucks up the ball is doing its job. And I don't know. That'd be kind of cool.
You could probably fit in well with some of your funky shirts in a pinball repairman's role.
Thank you.
You look like you could be a pinball repairman.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's a compliment. Even as I'm saying it, I'm intending it to be a compliment.
No, I'll take it as a compliment.
Okay.
I have the utmost respect for the people who both manufacture and repair pinball machines. Those are complicated. They're getting more complicated too.
Are they still being made? Like, are there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there are modern pinball manufacturers. It's probably, like you said, it's probably like fountain pens. Like it's not in vogue, but there's like a diehard group of collectors and stuff. Yeah.
Stern Pinball still churns out new tables like every month. If you follow them on Instagram, they've got awesome new tables. Like Mandalorian is just one they came out with this year. Like a lot of the stuff looks really, really fantastic. And there are websites that you can type in a table that you want to find, and it can tell you the nearest one to you. It's a whole thing.
Wow.
Oh yeah, man.
Pretty neat.
Oh, it's a thing.
What,
oh yeah.
What is the most revered pinball table ever created? Is there like one that's like the holy grail of pinball collecting?
There's probably not one. A lot of people like the Addams Family, Twilight Zone, Star Trek Next Generation is a popular one.
Okay.
And there's some really cool modern ones like the Stern ones that I mentioned as well. There's Theater of Magic, Circus Voltaire, Arabian Nights is a personal favorite. There are a lot of good ones, but yeah, Addams Family and Twilight Zone seem to be right there up at the tippy top.
Pretty cool.
I'm not an expert, but that's from,
You sound pretty expert-like to me.
I'm definitely not. Once you dip your toe into that world, you quickly realize that you are absolutely not.
There you go. Any pinball fans we have, please just lambaste Drew in the comments.
No, honestly, I will.
Drew, it's the Indiana Jones 1986 blah, 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 pinball
even
machine.
within the fountain pen industry, though, Brian, like I will sometimes read on forums on Facebook or other places, and I'm like, wow, this person knows so much more about fountain pens than I do. So even in the industry that I spend 8 hours a day plus on, I still am not, the most educated person out there. So
fair enough.
I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert at anything ever, because I'm never going to be.
I mean, you hop on the internet and you're never going to be the smartest person anywhere, right?
No.
Anyway, cool. All right, Drew, I got a question for you from Harper 70. Your work environment. That's not the question part. It's coming. How does it work with COVID and people working remotely?
That's a big question, and we've mentioned it here and there on the Pencast. We usually have company updates, but it's obviously been weird for everybody. But it's been the norm for so long. It's like the abnormal has been normal for so long. It's just a thing now. Now it does change from day to day. We still do have at the company here more than half of our workforce working remotely most of the time. So we are still very much in COVID mode right now. I'm happy to say that the leadership team of the company, Brian and Rachel obviously included there, have always seemed to have been one step ahead of a lot of the, government mandates, CDC mandates, stuff like that. And it's been really, really efficient in terms of making sure that our team is safe and protected. And luckily we have not been devastated by, any outbreaks or anything like that. So it's actually been pretty smooth, all things considered, knock on wood. And we're still doing that. And, they meet every week and discuss what's new, how we're going to do this. And, it's always top of mind, as stressful as it might be for the company's owners. It's always there, ever present, always on their back like a cozy little koala, right, Brian? Definitely not like a python or a boa constrictor, right?
It's more like the movie Gremlins, when you have those, yes, they're kind of cute, but at any second it could just rip into you. It's kind of like that. I'm like, okay, we've got it under control, but at any moment it could turn into a nightmare. So we just
we're fortunate in that before the pandemic hit, anybody who needed access to a computer had MacBooks. That was the piece of hardware that we standardized on. So when it came time to just move out, clear out, we were actually in a pretty darn effective place to be able to transition to remote work. It still took some doing. It was still a transition, but it could have been a lot worse in terms of just hardware and that physical transition to creating, 24 home offices essentially. So that was actually worked really well. The only thing that is kind of like, a big hit is that if you've been following us on social media throughout the years, I think it's pretty obvious that we have a really, really awesome company culture here. And when you are in the building with the team, there's a magic, honestly. There is a a feeling. There is an atmosphere that is unlike any place that I have either worked or any workplace that I have ever visited. It is something very, very special and very, very unique. And when you're missing most of the, human beings that make that magical, it is diluted a bit. And I do miss that. I'm very, very eager to having that return one day. We used to have a ton of events. We had, celebratory events, breakfasts, annual parties, things like that. Any excuse we could have. Like we had a culture squad that its job was to plan appreciation events. Like it's next level. Like the in-office culture is truly next level, and it's something that I immensely appreciated at the time and sorely miss now. But I have no doubt that when the time comes, that it will come back hard and it'll be fantastic, and I believe it'll be well worth the wait. So it's just not something we can do now, but that's probably the biggest frowny face moment. But hey, if that's the biggest frowny face moment, I will take it, because health and safety comes first, and luckily we have not had any frowny face moments in terms of that. Exactly. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, we could get into like nitty gritty of like internal procedures we've done and like distancing and stuff like that, but I mean, we have videos of tours of our office and stuff like that. I mean, thankfully we have enough space to be able to space out. So those who are in the office, especially the folks who are handling physical products, we have products we have to receive and inspect and ship out and all that kind of stuff. We do have people that have to be in the building to be able to function. So props to them. They are our heroes right now for sure. So we've had to adjust a lot of internal procedures and stuff to be able to maintain that distance and safety and stuff for those who are physically needing to interact with each other. So there's a lot of that stuff that I won't get into the nitty gritty of it, but we've had to adjust a number of those things, which we did relatively quickly. And we've pretty much got that down now, but it's kind of the ever present kind of thing hanging over there, not just with COVID related stuff, but now we're entering into seasonal flu time, and a lot of the symptoms look exactly the same as COVID. And so it's like, okay, my kid has a temperature or the sniffles or whatever. I have something, it's probably seasonal allergies, but let's play it safe. So we're having a lot of disruptions there just to, again, kind of play it safe. So we're having to pace things out. And that's why, we've talked in the Pencast and we've sent out newsletters and other things. We have our website, we extended the shipping time and all that. It's because we're having a lot of more of that kind of stuff that's coming up, and we're erring on the side of, well, let's just play it safe, and not, unknowingly bring something into the building that then, disrupts things to a greater degree and puts people's health at risk and all that. So, largely it's working well, and our people have been really good, really flexible and adaptable, but it's a slog. It feels kind of like we're running a race with like one shoe off. It's like, it's doable, but it just feels kind of weird, like walking around with only one shoe. Like it's an inconvenience. You can still do everything you need to do, but you're just kind of like wonky and lopsided all the time. That's very much how it feels, just kind of across the board. Cool. All right.
Next up, Brad the Bear 1 returns to us once again to ask us a question. This time, Brad is asking about the process of becoming an authorized retailer, of which you are, Brian. So I feel like you are uniquely suited to answer Brad's question.
Yeah. Good question. So I'll start off by saying it probably varies a lot in different industries. I really can't speak to what that's like. I connect with a lot of other business owners in e-commerce and otherwise. And it very much varies across the board as to the complexity and vetting process, if you will. In the fountain pen world, I can speak to that because that's what I've actually gone through, right? So it's not overly complicated. The specific process can vary from one manufacturer to another, so I'll kind of just give a range a little bit. But ultimately, it's about relationships and trust. That's really what it is. I mean, what does it mean to be authorized, right? So manufacturers will have specific preferences for how their products are to be sold, to be presented, displayed, priced, advertised, serviced, etc., because they have certain goals in terms of where they want their brand to be in the marketplace. And, especially if they're operating globally, how in the world do you keep the perception of your brand consistent with different cultures, different time zones, and all these various things? Well, you do that through intentionality, right? So they have their intentions, and essentially as an authorized retailer, we are taking the manufacturer's wishes and saying, yes, we are going to, essentially live up to what you have set forth as your goals. So there's a lot of things that are completely left up to our discretion as retailers, that we have a lot of freedom to be able to do. And I will say in the fountain pen industry, there's some hard, fast rules around, certain pricing and certain, ways of distribution and things like that. But they're probably, relatively basic, and not overly complex like maybe some other industries may be. I'm thinking about like fashion industries and some of the things where it's like there's a lot more money at stake. There's probably a lot more specific rules about how things are to be done. With us, it's really not. Or it's certainly if you're like in the healthcare field or something, there's going to be way more in place because you have governmental laws and regulations and things like that to deal with. There's relatively little of that to do. Basically,
the fountain pen industry is the Wild West.
More or less, but it's kind of like the Wild West, like now, like there's buildings that were set up in the prospecting days that are mostly abandoned. And now you're going to the Wild West, not really because nobody else has discovered it yet, but more because they've gone there and they're like, yeah, we're just going to go over here now. And it's kind of just left there. So there's a few people that like really love that and appreciate that. But like largely everybody else is like, yeah, okay, I know that's there, but I don't really want what's going on.
So basically, we're all just like reenactors pretending we're like Wild Bill Hickok and, pretending like we're getting shot in the back with the dead man's hand.
I mean, somewhat, right? Like there's a parallel to be drawn there, I guess. We're diverging a little bit, but anyway.
Sorry, so that was my
retailers,
fault.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Retailers, they want to know. Like there's benefit to being an authorized retailer because you know that the stock that you're buying is the real stuff. In other industries, it's probably more rampant to have counterfeits and these types of things and gray market, black market type products. So there's certainly advantage to having a guarantee and a consistency within your supply chain. So that's the advantage we get as an authorized retailer. Plus there's other things, service and support and accurate information about the products or these types of things that we can rely on from our supply chain. So there's a good benefit for the manufacturer and for retailers, and thus also for you as the end consumer, to having that kind of authorized relationship. So it's a good thing for both sides, because that you're going to be getting a better quality. You're going to be more able to rely on having your expectations properly met, whatever they may be. Yes, an individual retailer, could overpromise and underdeliver on some aspect of things, but then if they do that, a bunch of times, they're going to get a reputation for being kind of shady, and people won't buy from them, and therefore they will vote with their dollars, and that retailer will not sell any of those products, or maybe not be in business altogether. Or the manufacturer may say, well, we don't want an authorized retailer of ours to have such a bad reputation and be out of line for the way that we want to do things. We are going to no longer allow you to be an authorized retailer. Goodbye. You're doing a bad thing for our brand. So this is over. Likewise, if a manufacturer starts making terrible products, or they're way off the mark on their pricing, or they just get completely out of touch with what customers want, we as authorized retailers might say, yeah, this isn't really doing it for us anymore. So y'all do your thing. We're going to just stop carrying it. So it can work both ways. There's good checks and balances, I think, kind of all around. Not like minute by minute, but over time, it all plays out. Again, it's all about trust. It's all about trust with the relationships. So in terms of the actual process of being authorized, it's really up to the manufacturer. They are the ones who essentially choose who is going to be more or less a representative for their brand. Otherwise, they would just sell everything directly. But, when they have intentions of distributing their product throughout the world, they will oftentimes, if they're a global brand, they will have local distributors that, there's some logistical advantages to doing that because there are tax laws and some other things, culture barriers and language barriers and things like that if you have a local distributor, that smooths that out, whereas if you have a pen company who is expected to know, I think about a company like Lamy. They sell in something like 70 different countries. Like they distribute to 70 different countries. Well, not everybody in their little factory, relatively speaking, little factory in the grand scheme of manufacturing, is going to know all those different languages, all those different cultures, all those different expectations, and be able to tie it all together. So they have local distributors that have much more context to all the laws and regulations and import locations and all that logistical stuff. And it's the same kind of thing like that then is the same for all the retailers. So think about like, a brand like Lamy. They have a US distributor. So they work through that distributor. That distributor then works through the hundreds, if not thousands of retailers. I don't know how many they have, but I'm assuming it's a bunch of retailers in North America or wherever their kind of territory is. And then, basically you're building those relationships there. So like, we're not like calling up, the CEO of Lamy to set up our relationship. We're calling whoever the kind of authorized retailer is for our local area, wherever we are. So basically, if you want to be an authorized retailer, you make contact with whoever has the distribution rights for the territory that you're in, that you're operating your business, and you set up the relationship with them and you're working directly with them. They tell you all the kind of parameters and what's needed and yada, yada, yada. So that process can vary quite a bit depending on how big the company is and what their goals are and et cetera. But essentially you're applying to whatever degree that means after you built that relationship. So they're going to ask you questions about your business. They're going to look at your website or your storefront or whatever. You essentially have to kind of prove your legitimacy if they don't know who you are. If you're just kind of cold calling them and you're like, I'd love to sell pens. And they're like, okay, what's your business? And be like, well, I don't really have a business. I've never sold anything in my life. And, I'm steeped in debt and, I'm a college student and taking 25 credits per semester, but I really would love to sell your brand. They're going to be like, yeah, you're not really a business. So we're not going to do that.
You need to complete a series of challenges like with, Visconti, you need to climb to the top of Mount Etna and retrieve some lava.
Yes, Legends of the Hidden Temple style physical challenges. I think Nickelodeon Guts in the 90s, we got to climb, was it Crag Mountain? Was that the name?
Yes, the Aggro Crag.
Crag, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so I've had to do that a number of times with different brands.
Yeah, and he still refuses to go yet you still refuse to go to the top of Mont Blanc and retrieve cufflinks. I don't know why you're so stubborn about that.
Yeah, I know. That one's a challenge.
It's just the temperature, I guess.
Yeah. That's great. I haven't thought about those shows in a very long time. I don't know why that comes up. But yeah, so I mean, you apply, they vet you to whatever degree is necessary, so there's going to be probably reference checks, maybe some credit checks and the like, just kind of legitimizing your business and how much do they essentially trust you. I will say that gets easier as you go further along. In the beginning, it was hard because, well, Rachel and I were pretty sketchy. We were like, well, we're a couple of 20-somethings. We've never run our own business before. We're in our house with our kid, our infant, but this is what we are trying to do, or this is what we have the vision to do, or this is what we're doing at an infinitesimal scale, but we really want to do this. Will you kind of take a gamble on us? We'll pay you in cash. And that helps. If they're like, well, basically with every manufacturer, especially at the beginning, if you're like, they don't want to extend credit if they don't know you and know you're a legitimate business because they get burned too much, right? So, I mean, some of the inventory you buy can be quite a meaningful amount of money. So, they need a track record of proof. So it's one of those things. It's like, how do you get a track record of proof if nobody will kind of give you your break? So like the way we had to do it, we had to essentially climb our way up, right? We started out with Exoclair, who distributes Rhodia, Clairefontaine, Urban, Quo-Vadis. We basically bought like notebooks and bottles of ink. We weren't selling pens in the beginning. I was making fountain pens. So we were like in the pen business. They knew that there was legitimacy there. And we were like, look, we'll buy everything in cash, as soon as we receive it. And then, that built a relationship there. And then once you have a track record with one supplier, it gets easier because then you can use them as a reference and all that. So essentially it's common sense. It's like, if you want to have a lot of friends, go be a really good friend to somebody new. And then word of mouth and good, reputation will build upon itself. And if you're, a pleasant, honest, hardworking, charismatic person, and you have a good vision and you're executing your vision well, that naturally will kind of lubricate the gears a little bit and make it easier to then get, newer distributors. But I mean, it took a long time. I mean, like Lamy was super sketchy. We were super sketchy to Lamy at the beginning, and Pilot, and Visconti, and a number of them. Like it was years we had to work and prove ourselves to some of these brands. Even today, Mont Blanc, nothing against them, but they want to do things a specific way. We're like, yeah, we don't really do it that way. And we aren't on the same page about that. So we're like, all right, cool. Well, if either of us changes our mind, let's talk again. And here we are still 12 years later. But, that's basically it. So it's usually the larger, more established companies, the more credibility do you need, the more kind of formality and steps there are. So I would say if you're looking in any industry to get in, kind of break into it, if you will, to be a retailer, an authorized retailer, you got to start small, be realistic, be honest, and then just essentially prove yourself, climb your way up, and you just got to kind of earn it. And it's all about trust. If you lose your trustworthiness, it is frickin' over. Don't lie, don't steal, don't try to get away with things. If somebody sends you too much inventory on a purchase order, tell them they sent you too much, and be honest with all your accounting and everything. It's just that burns people probably more than anything else. And you get, sometimes people get desperate. They're starting out and they think like, oh, well, nobody will know. I can get away. Just don't do that stuff. It catches up with you eventually. So there you go.
Well said.
Anything to add there, Drew, or did I pretty much cover it?
Well, the way I became an authorized... No, you covered it.
I mean, you've seen it. You've seen us since the garage days. I mean, you've seen us.
Oh yeah, I can definitely verify that they were extraordinarily sketchy.
I mean, we kind of were.
That part was true.
You worked in our garage with no temperature control. I mean, we had no benefits.
There was a window unit.
There was a window unit. Yes. As you're vialing,
if you were near the window unit, it was pretty nice.
Yes, as you were vialing ink samples, the window unit was like right in your face, and it was like blowing just completely.
And then there was a box fan chained to the ceiling.
There was. That's right.
So
that
helped circulation.
That helped us circulate the airflow to the other half of the garage.
Yeah, no, not sketchy at all. For sure.
We cared to the level of our abilities in those early days. Our abilities were not great at that time, but it worked. You stuck around.
Yep.
You're still here. All right.
And they were extraordinarily patient when I forgot to clock in using the clipboard hung on the wall with the nail.
That's right. Good stuff all around. All right. Next one we have from Carolee69. What fountain pen should I get next? I love my Lamys, but I can't decide what next. Help.
Oh, no. I will do my very best. One thing I would also like to say that these questions are not all very super fountain pen centric. Like Brian said, these were questions that we kind of had on the back burner. We knew we wanted to answer them, but they were just kind of chilling for a rainy day, and today is that rainy day. So this one is actually very fountain pen centric. And I will tell Carolee069 that if you have been enjoying fountain pens, a good kind of sidestep to Lamy in that same general price range would be TWSBI. Both, like we mentioned, are very well engineered brands. You're not going to really be disappointed in the performance of said brands. They're very different aesthetically. They don't look at all the same, other than maybe you could compare a Vista to the fact just because it's clear, but it's a very different pen, so very different writing experience. You'll get to experience piston fillers and vacuum fillers in that same price range where you would be hanging out with a Studio and Safari and all those other things. So it's a good kind of sidestep if you wanted to check those out. It's not really a big risk. You're not really spending a whole lot more than you would be spending in that sub $100 Lamy family. And like Lamy, they have easily swappable nibs, so you might want to check those out. And then if you're ready for like a next level pen, if you've been happy with the Lamys but you want to step it up a little bit, there are a lot of great entry-level gold nib pens. One that we spoke about, Brian, recently on our underrated pens episode was the Pilot E95S. There was a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback in the comments about the E95S. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, yes, the E95S is perfect. I have two, I have one, I've never let it go. So that's a great one. I believe it's our most affordable gold nib pen at this point.
At this moment, yeah, you're correct.
Yeah, so that's definitely, if you wanted to jump up, that's a great one to jump up to, Carolee. And then if you want some more recommendations, we actually have a couple different videos that Brian has done on top next level pens. We actually, when you have seen this video, we will have a brand new top 7 next level pens video published. So check that out. We also have an older one, and then we have a top entry-level gold nibs pen that would also potentially be able to help you out there. So we've got a lot of content that kind of helps you make decisions in that zone if you would like to avail yourself of those.
There you go. Yeah, it's a great question. We get asked this kind of stuff all the time, and the context changes. Like we shot those videos; they've been very, very popular, well performers. But pens change over time. So yeah, like Drew mentioned, several videos there. We're taking some of the more popular ones and refreshing them. So yeah, keep an eye out because we're going to be publishing those very soon. So yeah, good stuff.
All right.
Well answered, Drew. Well answered.
Awesome. Our next question comes to us from Christopher with a K.
Heyo.
And he asks, Brian, what is your opinion on using a jeweler's cloth or polishing cloth to finish up with nib smoothing? I like my nibs super buttery smooth. Think hot butter on ultra smooth, ultra slippery ice. My God. And I found that micro mesh is not quite enough to the smoothness where I would want it. Good God, Christopher. How smooth do you need it?
I mean, ultra smooth, ultra slippery ice, Drew. That's pretty smooth.
Hot butter on ultra smooth, ultra slippery ice. That's going to run away from you, Chris. That is just going to like... Brian, what are your thoughts on this one? This is a very interesting one. Polishing cloth with nib smoothing. That's a new one on me.
My first thought, because I've used this very phrase, like hot butter on ice, physically, if you have a hot stick of butter and you put it on ice, which is cold... is it gonna be smooth, or would it get that thing where it's kind of like, would it get grabby? You know what I mean? Because sometimes, you know, it's like if you grab like a popsicle or something and your hands have a little moisture on them, like it'll make it like stick and like freeze to the popsicle. I've never actually tried taking hot butter and moving it across ice. So that's
a job for the Mythbusters, Brian. Our job is to talk about whether or not you can use a jeweler's cloth to polish a nib.
Okay. That is where I made all the notes in response to this. But just as you were reading that, I was like, would a hot butter actually glide that smooth on ice? I don't know.
We can do that. We can do that next episode.
Let us know, because clearly we need to know this.
Hot butter meaning liquid butter?
I mean, it couldn't be that hot, right? Like,
see, now I'm doing it. Never mind. Stop.
I feel like liquid butter would get cold that much faster, right?
It would, but we need to stop.
I don't know.
You're a bad influence on me.
I feel like it's just going to create like a crusty frozen butter like layer on top of the ice.
It would. It
definitely would. Like the ice is going to win. The ice is going to win. Unless your butter is like thermal. You know what I mean?
Thermal butter, I can't. Ha. Okay, Brian.
Okay, back to the actual question. So speaking of things that I don't know, I've never actually tried polishing the tip of a nib with a jeweler's cloth. I've never seen it done. I doubt it works, so I've never had a thought to do it, but I've never tried it, so I don't know. I've never tried rubbing butter on ice, so I could be surprised. But the thing I will say is I get what you're getting at here, Christopher, and we have a better solution already well established. We sell the product on our website. Every nibmeister I've ever talked to does this process. So I think I have a better way to go about it than your polishing cloth, but I don't want to knock the polishing cloth because I've never tried it. And I've never heard it. I've never heard anybody else do it or knock it or whatever. Yeah, so Drew is showing you right there the solution. It is called Mylar paper. So micro mesh, it's very, very fine. It kind of feels like leather. It is an abrasive, but it's not the smoothest abrasive that you can get. So if you want it's pretty dang smooth. I think the vast majority of fountain pen users find the 12,000 grit level micro mesh which is the micro mesh that we offer. They find that level of micro mesh to be all in all a desirable level of, it can get you a desirable level of nib smoothness and just a little bit of grab to it. It's not going to be the smoothest, butteriest stuff you've ever to see. Now I cannot stop thinking, visualizing the butter. It's going to wig me out. Told you this episode would be enlightening. So the Mylar paper, it's even smoother. It is still an abrasive on one side at least. The shiny side will get you nowhere because it's just plastic. It's the backer for the abrasive. But the dull side, that is the fine polishing side. And there's two different colors because they are two different grits. So the green grit will be the rougher, if you can even call it that, Mylar paper, and the white one will be really, really, really fine abrasive to the fractions of a micron. So literally use these things in conjunction in the order that Drew's holding it up there. Go from your micro mesh to your green Mylar and then to your white Mylar. And you're going to have a hard time getting it any smoother than that with any other method. The thing that's not good about using a jeweler's cloth, a couple of things. One is the cloth is soft, so it's not going to give you a consistent backing to the nib. So I would, when you're talking about smoothing something that much, particularly smoothing it in the means of texture, not just a visual thing, you basically need like a firmer backing. Ideally, you want to take something like the Mylar paper and you want to have it on a hard surface while you do it because you want it to be firm. The smoother you have it, the more likely you are to kind of round things off, and it's actually not going to give you the smoothest feel. So the cloth itself is not going to be great, but also the jeweler's cloth. It's impregnated with like a jeweler's rouge or a polishing compound of some kind. I don't know. There are different levels of polish that you can put in a polishing compound. I have no idea what level they put in jeweler's cloths. I don't know if it's the same thing. It could be different based on the brand. I don't know. It's probably not going to be as fine of an abrasive as what's on these Mylar sheets, but then again, I don't know 100%. But the bigger issue is that if you have something impregnated in a cloth, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to have an extremely consistent application of that polishing compound throughout the cloth. And you're working, when you're doing nib smoothing, especially to that degree, I mean, literally the way I've trained with Richard Binder, and the way you do it is you like put it on the micro mesh and you essentially do like small ticks. I mean, you're talking like a couple millimeters of friction on that abrasive. You're not like doing huge figure eights on this Mylar paper. So you're working in a very small area. And if you're trying to do that on something like a polishing cloth, there may not even be polishing compound in that particular spot where you are. So it's just going to be wildly inconsistent. Plus you could be jamming rouge. You could be jamming, cotton fibers and other junk up in the middle of your nib slit as you're trying to use this cloth to polish the tip of your nib. And you can end up with flow issues and all kinds of other junk. So I just don't think it's the right tool for the job. And the Mylar paper, it's a couple of bucks. It is the well-established, well-confirmed way to do it from every nibmeister I've ever talked to. So that is going to pretty much be your answer.
Agreed.
Did I get that spot on, Drew?
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
All right. Jared Ball Books asks us our next question. It says, is it possible to switch nibs on a pen? Excuse me. Is it possible to switch nibs on a pen if you suddenly have the urge to write with a broad? So like mid-inking, can you switch the nibs on your pen, Drew?
I don't think that's... no, the answer to that is no, Jared. If that's what you're after, if you're after a fountain pen that can have another nib size within it, the answer is no, not exactly.
No? Not like one of those like 4-in-1 clicky pens, You can... It would be like this big, but you could have like a click on the back and you can be like, yeah.
If you want to get... So I'm not entirely sure if Jared is asking... like in an instant, can you do that? Now, I could answer yes, you can, Jared. You can have an instant switch from a fine to a broad. The way that is done, though, is uncommon and requires the work of a professional, because what you can have done is to send your nib to a nibmeister or nib grinder, and that person could grind, if it's the right type of nib with enough tipping in the right places, they can grind the bottom of the nib to maintain a broad or larger nib. And then the top of a nib, you could flip it over right with the underside of the nib, and that could be a fine or an extra fine. So it is doable, but you can only pick two sizes. You can't have whole gamut. I don't know if that's what you were asking, but I did want to just mention, if we do have any listeners out there that may not be familiar with nib swapping, I thought this would be a good opportunity to educate you. So the answer is, if you do want to switch the nib on your pen, that is very often possible. In fact, there are a lot of fountain pen companies that go out of their way to make it possible for you. Lamy, TWSBI, like I mentioned earlier, they both manufacture and sell separate nib units that are very easily swappable onto your pen for, sometimes $25 or less with those two brands. With other brands, you have industry standard sizes, industry standard, there are number 5 sizes, which are kind of mid-size, the number 6 sizes, which are kind of the largest, most often used nibs. And with, we have Goulet branded number 6 nibs. Edison has branded number 6 nibs. Monteverde and Conklin also. All of these nibs are made, the ones I've mentioned anyway, are all made from the same manufacturer, Jovo over in Germany. And they're just branded differently. But some of them are more affordable than others. Some of them come with little nib housings and feeds. Some of them don't. But either way, if you feel like you'd like to explore that as an option, hop on the website, see if you can find out for yourself. If you cannot, our customer care team is happy to help you navigate those waters. And if you wanted to just reach out, you can call us, you can email us and say, hey, I've got this pen. Do you have a replacement nib for it? And we will let you know. Most of the time we will say yes or find a way to, but it's absolutely possible with a lot of pens, even if, you don't have a pen that has, nibs readily available for it. There are sometimes other options. You could buy, a used pen off eBay that maybe some other element other than the nib might not be ideal, but you can kind of cannibalize it a little bit and at least pull the nib and the feed. Usually on a fountain pen, removing the nib and feed is pretty simple and roughly standard as far as just popping them out. But the answer is yeah. If you've got a pen you want to switch, it's usually possible in one way or another.
Yeah. I'll add to that just one quick thought. Sometimes, especially if you have, like starter pen sets, or sometimes they have like calligraphy pens that you can find in like a big box, art supply store or something like that. A lot of times you'll see them with, a one pen with several different grips to it. That's a pretty common, usually that's commonly marketed. They're fountain pens, but they market them as calligraphy because they have stub nibs on them. They are designed to be able to have the option to put a different grip on there, which is definitely a little less like involved than having to physically pull the nib out and swap the parts and stuff. So that's kind of cool. But the thing with that is, fountain pen ink is water-based. So basically, whether you're swapping just the nib part out or a whole grip of a pen or whatever, it's not like you can just leave that thing hanging out there right with your broad nib for 3 days and come back and swap the fine back on there and go on your merry way. That part needs to be cleaned out. So it's, the part that you're not using. So even that, it's like, okay, yes, you have different grips, but it's really not meant to be like, let me change and use this for a few hours and then just kind of change back and be on my merry way. It's really more like you're buying, one pen set, and you can go through the setup when you do your initial inking and cleaning and set it up to be that way with that nib size. And then when you clean it out and do it all over again, you can then make it a different nib size. It's a little less, on the fly than you might have, with a rollerball pen or something like that, because that ink is going to evaporate out of there in a relatively short period of time if it has nothing else attached to it.
All right. And I will say, in response to my previous comment, you might not have to engage the services of a professional nibmeister in order to have a reverse grind on your nibs. Some pens just kind of do it. So if you're curious and you have a pen that's broad, flip it over and see if it writes on the other side. A lot of them do. It just depends. They're not meant to do that. So if it doesn't do that, don't be all upset about it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times they do, and they write just fine.
Yeah, and where that can come in handy is, if you, like Drew said, if you have a broader nib and, you are writing on your own paper that you love and all that, but then you have to write on some much more absorbent paper that you don't have any control over, that can be particularly handy as like a little hack, is just try flipping your pen over, writing with the top of the nib. Use light pressure, because it's not really made to be written like with a lot of pressure that way, because you can bend it and stuff like that. But if you use a reasonable amount of pressure, then it will put down generally less ink done that way. And it can be a nice little, like, just kind of get you through and not be bleeding through every paper you're writing on when you have to use somebody else's paper. All right,
Brian, are you ready for another question that you were required to give a decisive and absolutely confident 100% true answer on?
You know me. I am nothing if not concise and decisive with pen-related choices.
Yes. You do love you some brevity.
I do.
All right. Next question comes from Andy Bart 16, and Andy wants to know, Brian, what is the hottest pen brand right now?
Like physically the hottest, temperature-wise?
Clearly.
I mean, if you're heating up your pen so that it writes smoother on ice,
like hot butter,
like hot butter,
hot butter on wet ice.
Yeah, then that could be, maybe a metal pen could probably take more heat. So I would recommend like a Kaweco Supra, something like that. You could heat it up with like a blowtorch.
I'm sorry, Andy.
That would be kind of painful though. So you may need a special glove, like a welding glove, to accommodate such a thing. Maybe an oven mitt in a pinch could work. Though it depends how much you heat it up. I'm being a total idiot right now. Hottest pen brand right now. Basically, like, what is the brand that like everybody's talking about, right? Honestly, Drew, I racked my brain a little bit, and this is a tough one for me, especially in the days of COVID. It's been really difficult for like any one brand to be the one to like dominate the scene, because everybody's been pretty well disrupted, and the number of new products, new things, it's just logistically, it's been so much more difficult for everybody to do everything. I feel like I haven't heard like one brand dominating the internet waves, the airwave, the whatever data waves. They're not waves. I don't know what I'm talking about. Air waves, but it's not air. Anyway, I would say that there's definitely like attention to like startup companies, like smaller, more independent, makers and things like that. But none of them are big enough really where any one of them is dominating, the attention of the fountain pen community. But I feel like there are more kind of independent pen companies. That's much less of a rarity these days. And there are more credible, independent makers that are legitimately selling, good products in the fountain pen scene than maybe there have in years past. So that's kind of just like a general trend, is there have been more those kind of micro manufacturers, if you will. So that's one thought that ran through my mind. If you kind of add them all up, they're probably still not going to be a drop in the bucket compared to any one of the Pilots or the Lamis or the global brands around the world. But, it's definitely something that people talk about. I think for us personally, Sailor has been one of our hottest brands because it's a big brand. It's newer to us. And legitimately, they've just been coming out with a stunning number of seasonals and special editions and limited editions and things like that. So, I mean, legitimately, there's been a lot to be excited about. But then it just, timing wise, worked out really nicely for us with kind of COVID hitting. And I mean, we literally launched Sailor the week that we had to go remote with COVID last year. The timing was actually quite terrible in that respect. But for us as a whole, like getting to be involved with Sailor with a lot of the new stuff that they were dreaming up, that was really kind of cool for us. So for us, certainly a lot of that has been, that's probably the one that I'm thinking of the most. Pilot's always been a big brand for us. They haven't done as much new hot stuff, so they don't get talked about quite as much, maybe in general as being hot, but they definitely continue to be popular. So if you want to consider that, I think it's more of like a steady warm, like a nice, like a medium low on the stovetop. It's still pretty hot. Like you wouldn't want to put your hand on it. Maybe I shouldn't say that, because you do want to put your hands on pens. And here we go, back full circle into my hot pens. Grab your welding glove and pick up your pen. I don't know. I'm derailing, Drew. Save me on this question.
I would throw TWSBI into the mix. I think that as far as buzzworthy pens go, when they launched the Swipe, I think that was pretty huge. There were a lot of people that wanted to get their hands on that one. And again, it was hot not just because it was a new color or a limited. It was hot because it was inherently very, very different and new. And I feel like they should get extra points on that, on the hotness scale. And then they also, within the last year, have come out with the Prussian Blue 580 ALR, which was really hot. That one was very popular on the social medias. Everybody was taking pictures of theirs, and that was very buzzworthy for a while.
That one is physically hot. It will actually be warm to the touch. It's such a good looking pen. It is such a good looking pen.
And then there was the VAC 700R Iris, and that one made some waves as well. Again, it was very buzzworthy, very popular. And because it was totally new. Again, not just a limited color or a limited offering or seasonal, only available in North America, nothing like that. It was just, oh my God, no one's done this before. What the heck? So I do feel like TWSBI continues to get a lot of hype with their new releases, especially because they're still so very innovative and interesting and different.
Yeah, they've not been sleeping. I would put them
I would put them up right up next to Sailor. I agree with you on Sailor. I think that some of their hits, like Wicked Witch, did really well. Not to toot our own horn, but our Stealth Green just knocked it out of the park. That was freaking fantastic. So Sailor's had some big wins. So yeah, I would say TWSBI and Sailor probably in the last year, I feel like they've been riding a hype train.
Yeah, I'm curious too if y'all are still listening in this point. Please let us know in the comments, because I do feel like personally I've been a little more out of touch, because frankly, just with COVID life and my kids and the school and all the stuff, I've personally spent a little bit less time kind of browsing social media casually and stuff like that. So I'm probably a little more out of touch than I've been in the past with what's going on, buzzing on social in the community. Like, I know what's really solid and all that, but the newest, hottest thing that's like up and coming, I'm probably a little more out of touch. So I would maybe, I trust Drew a little on this one more than me, because he's spending a little more time on the socials than I am these days.
Well, you're definitely right about the small makers. I will say that.
Good, yay! And you've been to more pen shows than I have in the last year and a half.
Yeah, there's some really great independent makers out there for sure. A lot of people pushing the boundaries on designs and colors, and yeah, I'm excited to see more.
Good stuff. All right, next question is from Betsy Clough. What does demo mean when linked to a pen model or a new pen introduction? This is a good question, because this is, again, probably more of a starter question, but
yeah, but it's totally reasonable, and it's not something that it's so basic. Sometimes you're like, this, I keep seeing this, but it's not at that level where someone's going to define it for you. So demo means demonstrator. Demonstrator means clear, essentially. Way back when, I believe, you might want to correct me, Brian, I think it was Pelican or one of the older companies created a pen that was literally in an effort to demonstrate the inner workings of a pen, and it was clear for that reason, so that you could see the piston and all of the parts. It was actually labeled with the parts.
Yeah, I know Pelican for sure had it. I want to say it was in the 50s, maybe the 40s.
Yeah, I know that I've seen one with the Pelican. Yeah. In fact, I think they revived it kind of recently. I don't know that
they were the first to come up with it, or that it was like their thing.
Yeah, I can't say that for sure either, but that's definitely where the terminology originated. It originated as in an effort to demonstrate the inner workings, and this was like a trade show tool where they would say like, hey, here's a demonstration of our fountain pen, and it was clear. Yeah. And then it became a desirable type of pen. So then eventually the markings fell off, and manufacturers now market clear pens or semi-translucent pens as demonstrator pens. So it simply means either transparent or translucent. It could be colored, it could be totally clear, or semi-clear. But demonstrator in the fountain pen world means it's a pen that you can see inside of, either a lot or a little bit.
Yeah. And I don't know how far this term goes back. Again, there was a demonstrator. I mean, essentially what it was a pen salesperson's tool to go around to pen stores, because this is the way that it used to work back in the mid 1900s. There was no internet back then, if you're not familiar with that. There were really not any mail order catalogs or anything. Like, if you wanted something, you physically had to go to the store. So pen sales people would go and they would introduce new products, and they would talk to the sales people at the store, because they were talking to the general public who was looking to buy pens. So it was a demonstration tool for the sales people to be able to talk about the specific engineering and the specific design aspects of the given pen. I honestly don't know. I don't think it was ever intended to be something sold to the public. I don't know at what point that it became more of an industry term, or when they started making pens that were intentionally demonstrator as a marketing term. But I feel like it was not that much before we came on the scene. Not to say that we caused it by any means, but I think that the rise of the internet and the rise kind of at the same time as a bunch of independent like boutique ink makers, and kind of the explosion of lots of different fountain pen ink colors, combine that with some of the visual nature of social media and these types of things, has definitely popularized the term demonstrator and certainly led to pens like TWSBI, where they're very demonstrator forward in their design. So I think that is a relatively recent thing in terms of actual product development and marketing in the fountain pen world, probably in the last decade or decade and a half. Maybe it existed before, but it would have not been a very well-known, well-talked about thing, kind of back in the day. So you can thank the internet for that, I think.
Thank you, internet.
Yes, indeed. All right.
Brian, for the next question, do you want to finish us off with the final question, or do you want me to hit one final one?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll finish off the last one here.
All right.
By asking it here. All right. So this is from the Jason Kelly. The Jason Kelly, everybody. We are honored to be in the presence of the Jason Kelly. Are non-sailor inks really going to damage the sailor plated nibs? If no, which ones are thumbs up? Which ones are good to go?
Well,
and you can probably broaden this even just beyond sailor. A lot of pen companies out there will say you should only use our pens or our ink in our pens kind of thing. But anyway.
Yeah, and the bottom line to kind of keep in mind when you see language like that, like they're trying to tell you something, right? So that by putting that language in there, the manufacturer is more or less saying, we would rather you not do this. And if the manufacturer is saying that to you, it's always good to keep in mind, especially in terms of post-sale support. If the fine print might indicate that should you use or disclose the fact that you have used other non-that brand ink, you might find yourself in a different support scenario. So keep that in mind. Officially, it's a good idea to abide by the manufacturer's request.
Yeah.
And that includes pretty much anything in the instructions. Like, read the instructions always, because there are going to be elements in there that don't remove the grip section, don't unscrew the piston. Like, because if you do a lot of these things, you could end up voiding your warranty. So read the instructions. It is our recommendation to abide by the manufacturer's request. Mm-hmm. That being said, have we ever seen a non-sailor ink damage a sailor nib? I have not.
Not yet.
Think that I have not. And honestly, it's we would not sell any inks that would, intentionally damage any pen that we sell. Like we go out of our way to make sure that the inks that we sell at the Goulet Pen Company are fountain pen friendly inks. There very well are some inks that are more stain proof, a little bit more rough than others, but even those inks, if used with the proper care and maintenance protocols that we recommend in some of our other videos, are perfectly safe and fine to use as well. So we're not going to sell anything that is harmful to any other thing we sell. That's not something we're into. So, I would make sure that you pay attention.
Or I'll say, if we do sell anything that maybe requires some extra consideration, for example, shimmering ink has particulate in it, and you are for certain going to have a potential for more flow issues in any given pen with an ink that has a particulate in it than you would with purely a dye-based ink. That's kind of a blanket statement you make, but it's not like, oh my gosh, if you put Diamine Shimmertastic in your sailor pen, it's going to melt in your hands. Obviously, if that was the case, we would not sell those two things together, so it's not like it's that dramatic. The thing I'll say is, like, you can interpret this scenario here as like a money grab for, like, oh, Sailor just wants to sell more ink, so they're going to tell me, sort of like the car deal, the whatever car that you buy is like, you should only get it fixed to the dealer because right. That's like how they make a lot of their money. That's not really how it works in the fountain pen world. And I've talked to a number of people pretty high up at most of these companies. Maybe it was that marketed that way at some point decades ago, but people are pretty practical these days. It honestly comes from a good place for all the manufacturers that I've ever talked to. It's not because they just want to sell more of their ink. Let's be real. Any pen company, they're not like raking it in based off their ink sales. Like, I mean, look at Lamy as an example. They have Well, before they came out with their crystal inks, they had 7 colors. Like, they're not
for a long
shoveling
time.
ink out the door, but really where it comes from a good place. They want to warranty their products. It's not that if you use any other ink that, it's going to just immediately destroy things. But the problem is there are so many different types of ink that are out there, including ones that people are like home brewing up themselves and mixing different inks together. And it's not well known. There's not MSDS sheets and there's not a lot of stuff to know exactly what was used. So it's more that these manufacturers are like, well, we don't really know what the heck you've put in there unless we know that it was ours, because that's the only one we really have control over.
Yeah, it's about eliminating variables.
That's exactly it. So again, you're really just trying to eliminate fringe case scenarios here. They don't want somebody to come in having put, bacon grease in their pen and then get upset at the manufacturer because their pen is not flowing well or whatever. And they're like, well, what did you put in here? And they're like, well, I put bacon grease. And they're like, well, that's,
I've put the inside of a glow stick inside of a Twisby Eco and it melted it. It wasn't pretty. Oh, it also exploded.
Not very well. Yeah.
Yeah. No, not a good idea.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, so there's plenty of fountain pen inks that are just fine to use in your pens. But for logistical and, somewhat legal cover your butt kind of scenarios, the manufacturer can't say, well, it's okay if you use this ink and that ink and that ink and that ink and that ink from other brands, because they don't know what's in them. They don't know what their quality control's like. They could change them. They don't have any control over that. So they just recommend the things that they can control, which is their own inks. So that's where we as retailers and other bloggers and other people that are actually using and testing these things all the time, that's where we can kind of come in and be like, yes, okay, that's like the letter of the law. Here's the spirit of the law. And like, yes, use it up. But, just understand that if something goes off the rails and you end up having a situation, it could be questioned from the manufacturer standpoint if you're using a bunch of crazy stuff in your pen. But by all means, if you're living your best life and you want to put crazy stuff in your pen, nobody's stopping you. It's your pen. You can do whatever you want. You just have to understand the implications of that potentially.
Yeah, and if you do want to just kind of play it safe, obviously you can stick with the same ink. Sailor in particular is not a difficult brand to stick with because they have a ton of different inks, especially with the addition of their Ink Studio line. I mean, like you have everything you need right there, essentially. Yeah. But if you did want to branch out and, have some different brands' inks, you can always read reviews. And our website, I know, has a ton of great reviews on there. We've got sliders for ratings and things like that. So you could always, if you've got an ink that you've got your eye on, check out the reviews. If a bunch of people are saying that it's really funky and weird and did weird stuff, just steer clear of that one and go check out another one with a similar shade. You can sort by color on our website. It's not going to be hard to find an analog to something that you've got your eye on. So there's probably going to be one out there that is a good fit for you. Yeah. Iroshizuku, like Brian has said in past episodes, is a really calm, easy to clean brand, and Urban is another great brand that has very few ingredients in there. They might not be the most vibrant, crazy looking inks in the world, but that's because they're more simplistic in their ingredients, so we presume. Again, like Brian said, we don't have the MSDS for any of these, so we don't know exactly what's in them, but it's historically known as an easy to clean, gentle brand.
Yeah, and to kind of, wrap it up and bring it home here, you brought some great points, Drew, that I can speak a little more broadly. If pretty much every pen company, which, the vast majority of them who are selling, any extensive line of ink along with an extensive line of pens, they're all going to recommend using their ink in their pens pretty much for warranty purposes. But there's also like safety in numbers there. So you can assume that if every pen company is doing that, if you want to play it safe, just stick with all of the inks that are made by all the pen companies. And most of those inks are going to generally be on the safer side. So it's where you get into the boutique things and the stuff that's really pushing the envelope from boutique ink makers. That's like, you're a little more,
a little more fringe,
living on the edge, and that's fine. By all means, live it up. But I think if you're using a Sailor pen and you're putting Pilot ink or Pelican ink or Lamy ink, it's still going to be a pretty safe bet. You're not going to have a whole lot of problems. But to really hit back home on the question, I've never heard of the plating coming off of a nib. The plating, you're like rhodium plated. This is like an extremely durable precious metal that is being like some kind of electroplated, or it's not just like spray paint, like lacquer chrome paint like you would have on your car bumper. It's like electro-fused precious metal. There's not going to be a lot of inks that are going to cause any problems, especially with a reputable brand like Sailor. So I don't think you have to actively be worried about that. Most of the time, it's going to be flow issues that you're going to see with any ink and like pen combination things that would happen. But there you go. All right, that is all we got. Drew, I would say, I mean, we did 14 questions in an hour and 40 minutes or so.
Yeah, not bad.
I don't know what that math is, but I think we got under our 8.5 minute per question average. So that's pretty cool. But anyway, we don't really have anything more interesting to close it out with, other than you should definitely go check out some of the things we mentioned here on gouletpens.com. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video with others. If y'all like this Q&A format, you know, we kind of had a thought like, hey, maybe we'll do this. We can catch up on some questions. You know, it's still prep on our side, but we can record them in advance. That way, instead of in the future, if we are taking time off or whatever, which we do from time to time, we don't have to like be missing weeks and weeks. Maybe we can double up. So I don't know. We'll see. This is fun to record. Doing 2 in a week is definitely more work, but we'll see how we feel after we turn off the cameras. If we both collapse, we'll be like, I don't know if we'll do that again. But anyway, let us know what you think. Love hanging out with you all, and right on.